Welcome to episode 23 of the State Line Fast Break podcast. I'm your host, Kasey Boone. Alongside me, as always, the great Josh Miller.
Here we go. The NBA draft is now over. We have trades still in full effect, and we are here to recap day one and day two of the NBA draft.
There was fireworks all over Twitter come Wednesday night for the NBA draft. We had a lot of question marks of what was going to happen with some of the top prospects. Who was going to go in the top five? Was Ace Bailey forcing his way to a certain team? Were teams going to be aggressive and move up to get players that they had coveted? There was a lot that went down, a lot to cover. Josh, what are your thoughts on the overall draft this week, the two-day event that we had saw for the first time in history, and give a little bit of your winners and losers?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good night for the NBA. A lot of new stars, a lot of new faces entering the league, and potentially some very big names, starting with none other than the most coveted guy in this class by a wide margin and Cooper Flag. And just to start out with the quick, obvious winner, I won't hit it home too hard just because I just think it's so obvious and it's had a lot of time to set in. People have probably forgot. But the Mavericks are the biggest winner here because they were a team, even though they traded Luka, were still a team that was regarded as going to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference. And injuries happen. And looks like or they end up adding the best player in the draft by a wide margin, who's only 18 years old. Um, so, you know, he'll be 19 in December. So that's just an unbelievable get for them. I consider them the biggest winner. Um, we saw some questionable moves, and I'm sure you're going to want to get into those as well as much as the ones that we liked. Um, but I know you'll also want to hit home on this. I do consider San Antonio a winner in this draft because they sat at two and took a guy who's going to eventually become a big time scorer in this league. And then they actually don't even have to move up and they go get your guy, Carter Bryant, out of Arizona, who is just going to be another great wing piece in this league that is just full of wings. One thing that I did note in the last episode and end up happening is the centers going here in the first round and even the second round. The NBA has been extremely went from a wave of center heavy early when the league was started to really in the past, our lifetime has been moved to more guard heavy and now wing heavy. I thought we saw a good balance, seesaw balance of centers trying to balance out some of the teams. Not many teams have great centers, and a lot of teams are looking for that. So we saw a number of teams such as Phoenix, even Oklahoma City goes out there and grabs Sorber there in the first round. But a bunch of centers go. We got Queen headed to New Orleans, um, and there are many more. We got uh, Yang Hansen going to the Blazers. The Chinese Jokic is what NBA Twitter is saying. We've just got a lot of center. We got Malowatch. We can go through the list. We got Danny Wolf. We got the dude from Stanford who ends up going. We just got a lot of centers, which I'm glad to see as we see sort of that balance. So maybe go back towards the center position. One team I just do want to point out, and over the course of the offseason, I will probably underratedly talk about this team who by no means do I think that they're going to win a championship or anything remotely close to that, but a team that doesn't really get a lot of attention, who I think could be a sleeper play-in team next year, is the Washington Wizards. They had one of the worst offenses in the league last year, and they go out and get Trey Johnson there in the first round. So they're going to get an immediate bucket out of that. I think if I were a Wizards fan, I would honestly not hate the position that I'm in right now. So there's a couple winners there. I've wrote down Suns question mark as a winner and the Utah Jazz question mark as a winner as they go get Ace Bailey and then trade back up to get a guy who I think's got a decent chance to be something pretty special in Walter Clayton Jr. So um, I'll let you talk about some of the things you liked, and then we can kind of hammer home into the ones that we think that were very questionable.
I've got a few quick winners. Like you mentioned, I'm obviously going to believe the Spurs are a big winner here. The obvious landing Dylan Harper at two when they got the draft lottery look to move up. Now, 3 straight years the Spurs have picked inside the top four. Drafting Castle last year, Wembanyama the year before. They had number eight in last year's class, which they moved on to eventually get a 2031 pick that was moved then again, and then De'Aaron Fox trade. And then you get 14. So this is five lottery picks that you've had the past 3 years. Four of them are turning out to be players on your team, and the other one was used in a package to get De'Aaron Fox. So it's just very good work on that end from the Spurs. Obviously, it takes a lot of luck to get up to that point, but that's where they sit, getting Harper and then getting Carter Bryant at 14, who was very clearly ranked top 10 on most NBA draft big boards and in most mocks was mocked either ninth or 10th. And so that's a big win on its own. But to move past the Spurs, I will go ahead and say the Jazz. I don't have a question mark. They are big winners. Ace Bailey said, "Nope, I don't want to go to Utah." And then Danny Ainge, Austin Ainge said, "We're going to take you anyways. You're going to like it. We think you're the best player at this pick. So that's going to be the guy that we're going to roll with. And we don't care about the perception of the league, the perception from your camp. We're going to take you and you're going to like it in Utah." I thought that was a very smart move. Just take the best upside swing that you can in that position because the Jazz have not had a lot of luck moving up in the lottery. They haven't had many of these top five picks recently. They're in full-blown rebuild mode, trying to piece together a roster around Lowry Markkanen. You got to take the highest upside swing because you need a guy that can be a true number one. Ace Bailey has that upside. While he's got a lot of question marks, he's the one guy in this class that could probably reach what Flag and Harper outside of those two can get to. So I thought that was very smart by the Utah Jazz. And then they went out and dressed a position of need for them, which was a point guard position, which we all think Walter Clayton's going to be able to play at the next level. Um, a true scoring point guard first. He's got the ability just to get microwave hot at any moment. And it was very clearly a guy that they coveted and valued really highly as they made the move up to go get him. They felt like they needed to pass up the Nets, who apparently decided they wanted to take four point guard or guard type players in this class. And so good for the Utah Jazz, another team that we're going to see a lot of trends in these winners. It's good organizations that have the right process. Sticking at pick number 20, the Heat end up with Kasper Giacochonis, who I know you were a lot higher on than I am, and most people are a lot higher on than I am. But to get a talent like that at pick number 20, brilliant for the Heat. They continue to do smart thing after smart thing. It's why they are one of the best run organizations in the league. So pick number 20, I thought was very good value for Kasparis. Very well done by Pat Riley and that organization. Another team that I'll point out here, again, like you mentioned, the Phoenix Suns, I thought they had a great draft. Come on, Malawach, who I started to come around on a lot. I liked him as a top six prospect in this class. He fills an immediate point of need for that team as they have been missing big help ever since they got rid of DeAndre Ayton and then going out trading for Mark Williams for the 29th pick and a future 2029 pick that's going to be valued really low. And so I thought that was a smart move for them. And then to get Kobe Barea, another shooter, and then make the two transactions to move up in the second round to draft Rasheer Fleming, who everybody had penciled in as a first rounder. Very good week if you're a Phoenix Suns fan. I feel like they really rounded out their team and added a lot of depth to this roster that maybe they didn't have previously. And then you didn't mention them, but your own Memphis Grizzlies going up and getting Cedric Coward, who is one of my favorite players in this class. There was a lot of questions whether they need to make the move up to get him, but it's very clear that they saw what I saw and a lot of other people in draft circles saw. This dude is a baller. He's going to fill immediately that Desmond Bain role, be the shooter, floor spacer. He's going to be able to defend multiple positions. I really like that move for the Memphis Grizzlies. And I'll go ahead and touch on a team that I hated their draft. I thought the Pelicans just had a disaster of a draft. I do not like the Fears pick at 7. You just traded for Jordan Poole. You got DeJounte Murray. Fears is an undersized guard that's not a great shooter. Shot 28% from three last year at Oklahoma. Just a 6'4". He's got some decent height, but he's just a small framed body. I don't think he's got high upside in terms of finishing at the rim, which is a concern if you're a guard that can't shoot as well. I think there's some talent there to where he has some upside, but I think he's one of the worst defensive players that was drafted in the top 20 of this draft as well. That's a pick I didn't like, and then you give up your pick next year unprotected. Either you're giving up the most favorable pick from your team or the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks still have a million questions surrounding them, and then your own team, who's likely going to be picking once again in the top 7 of next year's draft, just to move up 10 slots to take Derek Queen, who is another oversized, heavier, big guy who has a similar, not a similar playing style, but a similar kind of habit and space that what Zion Williamson does. He doesn't hog a lot of lane outside the 3-point line. He's more down low, um, kind of back to the basket, doesn't provide you a lot of spacing, which is exactly the type of range that Zion Williamson hangs out in. I just don't think that that's a player that's going to be set up well to win in that organization specifically, considering they have failed Zion for the last 7 years. And you give up that pick plus 23 in the same draft. You're not just giving up that unprotected first next year, which you can maybe justify. You're just giving a pick up next year for a pick this year for a guy that you probably felt was in the range for you to pick at 7 in the first place. Just bad process, in my opinion, from the Pelicans. I thought it was a disaster of a draft for them.
Yeah, and the Grizzlies, I didn't want to be the guy to toot, toot the horn there, but I am very glad that we went and grabbed Cedric Coward. At first, I was a little confused on why we gave up one of those magic first rounders to move up, plus, our own picks swap there. But I mean, odds probably were to say that somebody would have taken him. Whether if it'd be the Thunder or if that trade doesn't go down with the Pelicans. I mean, who knows? But we go and do it. We get the guy we wanted, and I really hope that pick works out. As far as the Pelicans go, um, yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying on a lot of fronts. I don't hate them going to get Fears and Queen, two guys that can be pretty good, but based on the roster they already have, to me, is what makes it just kind of confusing. Does this say that they're going to try and move Zion? Or, I mean, there's been no intention or no rumors of intentions for that, but I mean, the roster itself just doesn't make sense. Nobody can shoot on the only Jordan Poole is the only guy who can really shoot the ball. And if you were to play many of those lineups there, because DeJounte Murray is really not a great 3-point shooter when he comes back. Obviously, Fears isn't known for his jump shot yet. I do think it will improve. Queen can't really shoot, and Zion's only got a set 3-point shot that he rarely takes. So, I mean, they got a couple of those uh, wing guys that are going to have to really step up their scoring if they're going to want to do anything. But yeah, I hate for them to give up that pick for next year. I think Atlanta is a big winner in that aspect. And then let's see, who did Atlanta go and get? They ended up getting Asa Newell there from Georgia, so he's not going to have to go very far from where he was from. Um, the Nets were extremely confusing to me on I thought, they had all these picks. I thought they were just going to move up and kind of get one guy who they really liked, but no, they just used all their picks. So they took Dem in there early on. They took Traore out there at 19. Took 22. They take Drake Powell, excuse me, and Ben Suroff, Danny Wolf. I mean, how many? It's just they have a whole starting lineup there, just in the first round. Um, I mean, I do like Danny Wolf, but yeah, all the other guys are guard bodies. They already have. D'Angelo Russell, is he on the move? This kind of can point to that potentially. Um, yeah, I should have mentioned the Miami Heat there in my opening statements there because I do like Casparis a lot, and if I were a Heat fan, I mean, I gotta like just the upside there. I mean, you sat at 20, and you got to take Casparis, who um, I don't know. I like what he can potentially be there. He's going to get to be able to handle the ball, and kind of do what he wants from a guard aspect there. Oklahoma City taking Sorber. You and I were talking just here before this and referring to what they could potentially do with Hardenstein down the road, which we have talked about previously on this podcast. They do go ahead and put a put a card in their back pocket on that aspect. They may lose big Jalen Williams this offseason. I believe he's one of their free agents. Um, the Wolves go and grab a center. And as far as Ace Bailey goes, he's really going to be the talk of a lot of these sports shows based on his agent, some of the things that kind of really aren't related to basketball. But the Jazz just took some guys who, they necessarily don't think they're going to be great next year. They're just taking the guys who think they could end up being extremely good, but they're not. I don't think that they're going to be necessarily super upset if they're not, um, with Clayton and Bailey. But there's a lot going on with Bailey. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of those details. Um, it is just a little fishy to me on some of those deals there, but I want to get your quick thoughts on one, VJ Edgecombe's upside, what you think he can potentially become, and the Charlotte Hornets getting Con Knipple at 4, Liam McNeely at 29, and is that all that they? Is that the Charlotte Hornets? No, they had one more selection
They
in.
also got Zion James out of Duke with 33.
Okay, yeah. So I want to hear what you have to say. One, about VJ Edgecombe, what you see for him there, and especially in year one in this 76ers project. And then what do you think about what the Charlotte Hornets did?
I think for the 76ers specifically, this was the perfect player that they were kind of looking for. A little bit more athleticism than what they have on their roster. Maxey is not the most the is not touted as a premier athlete where he's going to be jumping all over the gym, guarding the best perimeter guy. I think that is exactly the type of mold of player that what they needed contradicts what Maxey and what McCain provides you. I think he's a more seamless fit next to Maxey than what McCain is. I would rather see Edgecombe sliding into that starting lineup and they use McCain as that microwave six man. He can play next to Paul George and Joel Embiid. He gives you a little bit different sauce than what that have on that roster. In terms of his upside, I don't ever see him as a guy that's going to be a perennial all-star per se, at this point at least. I think he needs to develop the shot a little bit more. I don't know that he provides you 25 point per game scoring upside, but I think he's a guy that's going to do a little bit of everything for you. He's going to provide just highlight play after highlight play. He's going to be an electric player to watch. He's going to be a lot of fun in that offense. Just process wise, I think he was the best fit for what Philadelphia needed. I think Con Knipple, who went fourth right after him to the Hornets, which you just mentioned, would have also been a good fit there. The 76ers have enough going on that Ace Bailey, I just would have been a train wreck there. That would just not have been a good situation for the team or the player. So I like their process going after somebody that's very highly rated in terms of having good character, which is what VJ Edgecombe is known to have as well. And so the process, what the 76ers went through, I think was the right thing to do. And then an underrated draft pick for them was Janai Broom. I think he's a guy that's going to be win now for them. He's going to be able to play a bench role right away. Again, I don't know exactly what his upside in the league is. I don't know that he excels necessarily at one thing. I think he's just going to do a little bit of everything, a little bit of dirty work for you, be a fun little bench project for them. And then to get Justin Edwards back, which they just re-signed him on a new 3-year deal, who stepped up big time in the absence of a lot of those guys that I had mentioned earlier. Very solid start to the offseason for Philadelphia, a team that I think still has a lot of work to go, but they're in a wide open Eastern Conference. And so anything can happen for them this season. They got to stay healthy, obviously. I heard a good proposal the other day that they need to go down the Clippers Kawhi Leonard role, which is just sit Joel Embiid for half the year, bring him back right before the All-Star game, let him get his feet wet, and then after the All-Star game, full steam ahead, see if he can close out the rest of the season for you and maybe be healthy going into the playoffs. In terms of what the Hornets did, I thought it was, again, their process in terms of going with a guy that's going to be a steady balancing force there. And Con Knipple, I think he's going to do things differently than what you already have in Brandon Miller and Bridges. Ace Bailey, again, I didn't like the fit there, and so I thought them passing on him, not necessarily a bad thing, even though the talent-wise for Ace Bailey is probably higher than both of those two players that we just mentioned. The negative of what Ace could be is a lot further down the line than what either one of these two players will be. And so for these teams specifically, I think it makes a lot of sense. Con Knupple's a guy that I think even at his floor, he's a 10-year NBA player. He's going to make shots, do the dirty work. He's physical, more physical than what maybe people think he should be or expect him to be. And so I think he can be a guy that can get 6, 7, 8 rebounds a game. And it's going to be a lot tougher and harder playing than what you get out of Brandon Miller and Bridges. So I like that addition to their roster. And then McNeely was one of the guys that we were a lot higher on the most to get him all the way down at 29. I think that's a direct result of what the end of the season was for him after that injury. Did not shoot the ball particularly well, and he is pegged as a shooter. Um, and then he's not the most athletically gifted guy, so he was never going to wow people in the pre-draft process athletically. And so again, these are just two solid players that I think at their floor are going to be guys with roles as three-point shooters who can play 10 years in the league. And so I really like and I respected what both of these teams did throughout the draft. I don't know that they're necessarily big winners. I don't know that they're necessarily big losers. And so we're just going to get these guys on the court and see what they can turn up to be. So I was just impressed by the way that these teams operated. They didn't do anything rational. The Jazz were a team much more equipped to take that risk on Ace Bailey, which is why I think they're big winners in this draft. Getting a guy like that at number 5, even though he doesn't want to go there, they need that high upside swing that even if it fails, you're not losing out much because you got him at a value, and it's just the best player on their board for that team specifically. So overall, I think it was a very fun, entertaining draft, a lot of trades. Again, back to the Brooklyn thing, I don't necessarily I'm not going to be the one that's going to sit here and hate on them taking multiple guards because they're a team that their biggest question going into the future is they in Jordy Fernandez system, they very clearly wanted a true point guard that can run this offense and take a guy in Igor Demon at 8. I don't think he necessarily has to be a true point guard. I think he can play kind of a combo guard type of role. He can play next to Trey Ori if that's the guy that they see as their true primary point guard. Drake Powell, I think, can play 2, 3, can play the 1, can do a different bunch of different things. He's going to be that shooter out on the wing. We'll see how that works out. I didn't necessarily like the Ben Saroff pick for them after already taking 3 guards. And then I'm a fan of Danny Wolf. I think at 27, that was good value. I had him at 15 to the Thunder. And so I like that pick, Danny Wolf at 27. I think that was a very smart pick. I think they probably reached a little bit on Yegor Demon. There clearly seemed to be a market, a trade up market in this draft. I think they probably could have slid back a couple picks and still got Yegor Demon at 11th, 12th, 15th, whatever it was. And so, the Nets are not huge winners here. I would lean more towards loser just because of the perception that they have going with all these guards, but I don't necessarily hate the process that they went through.
I mean, yeah, you would think out of this many, one of them has to hit. It's kind of how I took it in a way that night. Thinking, man, they really could package these together, move up, and go get somebody, or we'll take them all. We know two or three of them could potentially bust out, but one of them has to give us at least something worth what we're doing here. And it's a little different than the NBA or the NFL, where draft picks are much more valuable. I mean, was that fair to say? I think the NFL draft picks are much more important. Um, Not that the NBA picks aren't, but it's just the way it kind of is, especially once you get past a certain point where Dallas wasn't going to trade with you regardless of if you were going to give them all those picks or not. Same with you. I asked you earlier in the week, would you have taken all of these Nets picks just for pick two? And you leaned actually towards no. So I mean, if it wasn't going to be Giannis, then they were just going to let's just take them all here and see which one hits. It's kind of how I took it. And then obviously they're already a team that's rumored to be in any kind of trade. They're just trying to get in any kind of trade possible to be that third team, to be that fourth team inside of a trade. So some of these guys I think could be on the move. Um, and I mean, I guess they'll have a fun summer league. They can kind of play many different lineups, and I don't know. Maybe they're the summer league team to watch this year. But after watching, I just want to circle back. I started with them, and I think we should probably end with them. Just I understand this is what's being talked about, but look, this is just how it broke down. But Cooper Flag to land to Dallas. I did watch his his press conference with your guy Nico Harrison, defense wins championships guy, and Jason Kidd. And Jason Kidd, just really spoke just glowingly about him. Didn't really seem like a guy who's wanting to consider moving to the New York Knicks. And seems to be thrilled and feels a lot more rejuvenated than he did after the Luka trade, based on his just facial reactions that I've tried to pay attention to there. But Jason Kidd's been around young guys, man. Like he was around Giannis at that young age. He says he's going to put the ball in Cooper Flag's hands, and he says that he's going to it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to turn the ball over, and it was the same process that he had with Giannis. And now look at what Giannis has done. And Giannis has spoke glowingly about how Kid handled that, what handled him, and also noted out that he's should be very thankful for being able to come in and be a sponge to, I mean, the three guys on their team, whether they're in their prime or not, they're not, but they have three guys on that Dallas Mavericks team that will be NBA Hall of Famers, and Kyrie, Klay Thompson, Anthony Davis, who he's just going to get to learn from day one. He's already I saw a picture. He was already with Kyrie, who I'm sure he may have already known just from being a Duke guy, and also Derek Lively, another Duke guy who he probably already had a connection with. I just think he's going to be able to come in. I'm sure he's going to be the runaway heavy rookie of the year. Um, I'd like to hear what you would predict his stat line to be. I think you can already kind of bet on it. I think it's sitting around 17 points a game in a rookie year, maybe anywhere between 4 to 6 assists, which I think is pretty high. But based on Jason Kidd's comments, he's going to have the ball in his hands, especially with Kyrie being out first part of the year, and then anywhere between 5, 6, 7, 8 rebounds. So I mean, I guess I would probably lean towards that. I think he's going to at least give you 15, 5 and 5 in a year one. Um, and I think he's going to make an immediate impact among other guys here too. But just based on the makeup that the team already has, I mean, they've got not only do they have those guys I mentioned, they also have really good role players. We saw them re-sign Gafford there. They have Derek Lively, they have PJ Washington, they have just really solid role players that, to be honest, they could be good enough role players to win a championship. We saw them get to the championship and ultimately lost, but they still have a lot of the same role players. And I think that they probably will do something else. They're going to go out and add a guard, which, based on their roster right now and their cap and all those kind of things, it's going to be interesting. They're kind of restricted. I think there's, if they get somebody, they're going to have to take a very low paycheck. But I think someone would be willing to do that to see what they kind of have lucked themselves into. So before we move on, and I would like to hear your predictions on what Cooper Flag's stat line could be in a year one as far as averages go.
Yeah, I'm sure Jason Kidd is thrilled to be working for a joke of an organization that traded away one of the top five players in the league and then backwalled their way into getting the number one pick in this class. I'm sure he is thrilled. I'd be thrilled too. Um, and that doesn't take anything away from Cooper Flag, but I think there's a chance that he's going to be a type of 17, 18 point per game. I don't see 20 points and above in his rookie year. That doesn't happen a whole lot. Certainly didn't happen for anybody in this last year's class. Wimby did it. I think we've had Ant do it. Luca did it. It just takes a super special type of player, which I think Flag is a special player, but I don't think he's a special perennial scorer at this point. I think he's going to do a ton of different things in the league where he's going to be impactful all over the court. I don't see him being just a 27, 28, 29 point per game score in the league. I think 20-point upside surely is there. But I don't think in year one we're going to see that. So I think it'd be 17, 18 points per game. I, I think he's going to have a chance to go 7 or 8 rebounds, but again, he might be playing the three if they're going to go with Anthony Davis and one of Lively or Gafford, who just got a big extension at the five. And so there's a chance he's playing the three and is going to play against two guys that are also going to demand close to double-digit rebounds. And I don't value much that he's going to have the ball as like a point guard. Like there's a rumor out there that they might play him at the one a little bit. I think Chris Paul is certainly a guy that they're going to be looking to grab in free agency, and if that's the case, he's going to have the ball in his hands a ton. And so that maybe would lessen the assist numbers that what you're going to see Flag have, but there's no doubt that's going to be something they're going to want him to do. And then again, I think there's a legit chance in year one he's going to be a guy that has one block a game, one steal a game, impact the game on the defensive end, which is what everybody pegs him to be this great defender. I think he's just okay as a defender. Again, I've said it multiple times. I think he's going to be a better off-ball help defender than a true point of attack defender. But there's no doubt he has legit upside as a weak side defender that's going to make special plays at the rim and one-on-one contests. I do think he's going to excel at that in his NBA career. And so let's say 17 points a game, 7 rebounds, 3 to 4 assists, a steal and a block a game. I think that would be a very good rookie year and would certainly put him right in the thick of things as a rookie of the year contender, which would break the streak that the Spurs have going back to back now. And they've got two guys that are going to be fighting for it. I don't see Carter Bryant being in that discussion, but Harper's definitely going to play quite a bit, likely as the backup point guard. And so that's definitely going to be something that Cooper Flag is going to have the chance to do this year. With Kyrie being out, he's going to have even greater demands on the offensive side than what he would in a traditional sense. But they're going to be a team that if Anthony Davis stays healthy, they're certainly going to be in the play-in mix, and they could, when it's all said and done, if they get Kyrie back at the end of the year, be a team that's in the thick of the play-off mix. And so that'll be really fun to keep an eye on as we move into the season next year. That's enough talk about Cooper Flag. I think we'll move on now, talk a little bit about the upcoming free agency that starts July 1st. We've already had a lot of news about players re-signing with their team. We had the Gafford deal we've talked about several times already. Nas Reed just signed a 5-year, $125 million extension to remain a Minnesota Timberwolf. What does that mean for the future of Nickeil Alexander-Walker? Likely means that he will be finding a new home this offseason. A big trade just went down. Some people might not care about it, but I think it's pretty impactful for the Cleveland Cavaliers as they have acquired Lonzo Ball to be their backup point guard in exchange for Isaac Okoro. And they have then since re-signed Sam Merrill on a 4-year, $38 million deal. Both of these moves likely triggering Ty Jerome also joining Nickeil Alexander-Walker and finding a new home this offseason. And then a very smart move once again by the Miami Heat, re-signing Davion Mitchell 2 years, $24 million. So a bunch of moves already taking place as this is the period where teams are allowed to renegotiate with their own players. And so we'll get a sense of who's going to be returning, who is going to be entering the free market in just a couple days. Several big moves happening. Josh, do you have thoughts on the Nas Reed extension as well as what the Cleveland Cavaliers are up to?
I am ecstatic. I'm ecstatic. Lonzo Ball is finally joining a team who we might get to see play come playoff time. I just hope he can stay healthy. That's really the main thing there. I enjoy watching Lonzo Ball play basketball. He plays the game very, just in a way I respect a lot, and you know, I've always really been a fan of his as far as on the basketball court, what he's capable of on the offensive end and really the defensive end. I really do like that addition for Cleveland, man. And they needed to do something. There's no way they could exactly run it back. Even though they ended up were the 1 seed, but just the way that series ended against Indiana, just there's something that had to change, and we'll see if this is it. Um, and you know, I'm very happy for Lonzo Ball get a new fresh start here in Cleveland, and it'll be they really should be no reason that they don't finish with the 1 seed again next year based on how the East is looking. They're going to have a lot of, I think they're going to have more pressure on them this year than they've had just because of how the East is shaping out. Like, you know, if they don't do anything this year, then really there's no telling what's going to happen. And we already may be able to see something happen before then. But Nas Reed joining back to the Timberwolves kind of makes me sick in a way. I was hoping he was going to leave the Timberwolves and maybe go to the Eastern Conference or go somewhere else. I hate, you know, the Timberwolves are going to be a good team once again. And Nas Reed, is he a perfect player? No, but he's capable of really taking games over. And that I think he'll have an even bigger role next year. They probably will lose Alexander Walker, like you mentioned. And he could go to a team and really help a team out. Based on what we've seen so far, a lot of teams preparing themselves for these, or you know, adjusting themselves for all these new apron rules. And we see the Celtics. It's almost like not to the point where they're punting on the year by any means, but they are just not going all in as they could, and we're starting to see that. I mean, obviously they're listening to offers with White, whether if they actually trade him or not, or if they trade Jalen Brown, probably won't happen. But the fact that they're even listening and then already gotten rid of Holiday, already gotten rid of Porzingis, just kind of tells you that we know our window, or well, we know Jason Tatum's not going to be in this year. Let's hold off on going all the way in we could, um, while he's not, while we're going to miss him next year. So we're seeing a number of things. We're getting notifications as we speak about certain guys, like you mentioned, Davion Mitchell re-signing. As we have the free agency approaching so fastly, we see teams already trying to get um, deals done, but we're going to have to pay attention to the deals that don't get done either, just like Austin Reeves, who, as many probably expected him to opt out of his contract or whatever. That way he doesn't, or no, they offered him what, 20 to 25 million a year, and he's going to pass up on that to become a free agent next year, right? So, um, he's going to be looking for probably somewhere between the 40-45 million, if I had to guess, going into next year, if he's going to have a similar season to what he just had here. I think if he can replicate that, um, although he didn't do anything there in that first round of the playoffs, he's someone who did show in the regular season he can play off of Luka. He actually can play off of Luka and LeBron, still give you over 20 points a game on a really good percentage, and give you about 6-7 assists. So I don't think the Lakers, they don't want to lose him, but they could really get in a sticky situation next year, depending on what LeBron James is going to do, because for some reason he's not going to take a pay cut. And I'm not one to say people should take pay cuts, but I mean, when you're already a billionaire, I think you should be willing to take a pay cut here. But it looks like he's not going to be able to, or he's not going to choose to, rather, and it's going to restrict them on a couple things. And if I were a Lakers fan, I wouldn't really want to lose Reeves, but you still have a hole that hasn't been filled with that center position. So we'll see what they can do in free agency. They didn't get to trade up and take a center there in the draft. I'm sure they looked at trying to maybe go get Kalkbrenner, but it didn't happen. So uh, I'm curious to see what they're going to do. I still think we're nowhere near done with seeing trades, even massive trades, and guys who maybe aren't being talked about right now could end up being traded. And I think it could be a team like the Lakers, or like somebody who's missing a certain position on a team that feels like they are indeed ready to contend next year, like Los Angeles at the center position. And now Ty Jerome is going to go get, he may not get as much money as we anticipated towards the end of the season, but he's still going to go somewhere, and he's still going to be somebody. He's still going to be a good player for somebody. Whether if that's, I don't know, Detroit was a team that came to mind, maybe who could add another score, just somebody who can come, who needs just another score, maybe off the bench, or can take some starters minutes. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in this free agency window. It's not the year of major free agents by any means, but still many moving pieces. And I fully expect the Grizzlies to be looking into some guys, and even your Spurs to be looking into to a lot of these free agents.
There's a list of 5 teams off the top of my head that I'm kind of keeping my eye on. Number one's the Utah Jazz. They've got Jordan Clarkson. They've got Colin Sexton. They've got John Collins, who just opted in to his deal for about $28 million. Those three are on the trade market. You just mentioned the Los Angeles Lakers. Are the Lakers going to be a team that will continue to push to get a guy like Walker Kessler? Could they back channel their way into a John Collins deal if the discussions don't go well for Kessler? Is Reeves somebody they would give up to get a guy like Walker Kessler? Those are all big question marks there. Another team is Brooklyn. We already know what their draft looked like, but they still got guys like Cameron Johnson, Deron Sharp. These are guys that are going to be on the market, on the move for them, most likely during the summer. How are they going to handle that situation there? Another team I would keep an eye on is the Pelicans. Do they want to keep guys like Trey Murphy? Do they want to keep guys like Herb Jones? Again, another team that had a disastrous draft that we bring heavy question marks about what the future of those organizations are. And then two teams that I haven't heard a lot of buzz about. One of these teams was involved in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes, but we haven't heard a ton of what their other plans are. Is the Miami Heat. They've been rumored to be a Jonathan Kuminga team, and are they going to be willing to offer him a substantial contract to the point where the Warriors aren't willing to match and bring him back? I think that would be a bad move, but that's certainly something that it seems like they're interested in doing. If that doesn't go well, there was already an odds list that came out, and you'll see it from Bovada and other betting odds services that are putting odds on a Bam Adebayo trade. Is he somebody that maybe not this offseason, but going into the deadline next year could be on the move? And then I've got my eye on the Los Angeles Clippers. You have your eye on the Lakers. I've got my eye on the Clippers. What is this team going to do? Can they really afford to just run it back with Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, James Harden, and think that this team is going to be able to make a deep playoff push? I don't think so. I think that they have moves that need to be made. What those moves are, I'm not quite sure. That's what their front office gets paid to do. Steve Ballmer's got an open checkbook, so I don't doubt their ability to go out and make things happen if they choose to do so. I would be very intrigued to see what a team like that could get up to if the circumstances presented themselves. I'll go ahead and just throw another team out here. A team that I want to see make substantial moves. I'd love to see him go out and get Nickeil Alexander-Walker or grab another veteran wing piece if they were a team that could trade for Trey Murphy or Herb Jones, or I think Cam Johnson would be a great player here. I'd love to see the Detroit Pistons be aggressive, do something like what the Orlando Magic just did with Desmond Bane. Go out and give up assets to go make your team better. The East is as open as it's ever been. I'm still not sold that Donovan Mitchell's the guy that's going to be able to lead the Cleveland Cavaliers to a title. And so I think that's still wide open. Whether the Cavs are going to be great in the regular season again, which we expect them to be, I question to see what that team has in store for us in the playoffs. And so I love what the Magic did. I think I'm going to be very high on the Magic going into next year. It's going to be a fun team to watch. And I would love to see the Detroit Pistons do the exact same thing, go out and trade maybe some of their depth pieces and a couple picks to get somebody that's a true difference maker in that starting lineup. I don't think you even have to give up depth pieces and that many assets to go get a guy like Cam Johnson, but that's certainly something that they could do if they choose to do it. Trey Murphy would be great there, and that's probably a guy of similar value to Desmond Bane. So that's something that I would love to see happen. I want to see Detroit really push in and go for it. They've got the assets and the team to be competitive in that Eastern Conference this year. It's just a fun off season. The Knicks are still a team that's always going to be lurking out there just because it's a big market with they've got a lot of eyes on them after they've just made a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. You like the Wizards, I could see them getting aggressive and trying to be a play-in team this year. I still don't think the Suns are done making moves. I think they're trying to balance out that roster. I don't think Ishbia is ever going to be satisfied. It sounds like there's a lot of fun to be had as we're just now starting getting into the thick of free agency. There was again another Giannis rumor, not saying he's being traded this offseason, but it was during the second round of the draft. Jonathan Givony and Shams both said that Shams or that Giannis is keeping a close eye on the Bucks offseason, taking a close eye on their first round, taking a close eye on their second round. He is following everything they do very closely, monitoring it, making a decision about his future. It sounds like he's going to be back for now. Could this conversation repop up at the deadline or next offseason? That's certainly to be seen. So I'm just really looking forward to what this offseason. And then we haven't talked about it yet, but Summer League starts up shortly after free agency does. We will start getting players to report to their teams this week. We've already seen a lot of introductory press conferences and all that stuff. Monday starts the first day of Summer League practice. We'll see the California Classic and some of these other Summer League venues. And then again, we'll have Las Vegas Summer League starting up July 10th. We'll see Cooper Flagg take on Bronny James, and we'll see VJ Edgecombe take on Dylan Harper. There's a lot of fun to be had. The summer league's some of my favorite ball to watch, as we're gonna have all these young guys out there playing freely, playing fun, getting a chance to get their feet wet in the NBA.
Yeah, the summer league is going to be fun. We're going to have guys getting thrown at different positions, especially, I mean, the talk of the show here, Cooper Flag. I mean, Jason Kidd says he's going to throw him out there at point guard in the summer league. So we'll see kind of what that is. I think it is fun to see a lot of these young players getting to do a bunch of things there. Even some second year guys get to come back and get some more um, reps in. And then I've got a team, an eye. I've got my eye on the 76ers and what they're going to do because, I mean, they finished the year 24-58. I've really wanted to be the one that was going to come out and declare that the Sixers were going to be, a real contender in the East next year. And it seems like a lot of people are already jumping towards that, which makes me a little more hesitant to believe it. Um, Surprisingly, because every time that everyone goes all in on the Sixers, they just completely fail. But they're going to have expectations on them to be extremely better than they were this past season. And what they can do, I really don't know. You mentioned they brought Edwards back. Is there still any chance they move Paul George? Does anyone even want Paul George at this point? Probably not. Um,
I think that would be a mistake on their part. You're gonna have to give up assets to get rid of him, and I don't see a world in which he has a bad season as he had this past year. I think a healthy season of Paul George, you're gonna get at least a quality NBA player again that can repurpose his value. I think all those proposed trades of Paul George this offseason would just be incredibly dumb for the Sixers to make a move like that.
but it's also why I do think I'm not saying they're going to win the East, but I just think that they could almost get to close to doubling their win total, depending on what they can get out of Embiid and George. But Maxey and McCain should be able to come back and give them some good a good year. And then obviously we talked about Edge come here, but the Hawks as well are a team that, I mean, they've got a good amount of talent on their team. I have mentioned multiple times that I wasn't very, or I thought they would move on from Trey Young, and I think that definitely could happen if it ends up going south for them in this Eastern Conference before the deadline this coming up season. Because I mean, they're gonna have Jalen Johnson, who's really he ends up got hurt last year, but he's a guy who was giving them almost 20 points a night. Dyson Daniels almost won Defensive Player of the Year. They went and got Porzingis, who it's not a guy I would want my team to go get, but he if he's healthy, he obviously can be a difference maker for a team. They have Reece Sachet, who, yes, he did go number one. I do think he's going to be a pretty good player in the league. I'm not saying he'll be an all star or anything like that, but he's a guy who went down the stretch last year and had multiple games of 30 points plus. So, you know, the Heat, and then obviously they got Quinn Snyder, who I'm a fan of, and I believe you're a fan of. So there's no reason that the Atlanta Hawks shouldn't be in the thick of things next year, along with the 76ers. So I just think those are two teams to keep an eye out on if they could go and grab, if they're capable of going to grab one of these free agents, like you mentioned, how the Pistons need to go out and do one more thing. I just think the Sixers and the Hawks are two more teams that, if they can do one or two more things that really have a decent chance, which is just kind of sad to say, but like, yes, the East is wide open, but it's just going to make it more meaningful during the regular season on any given night because it's so wide open. I don't think we're going to see a dominant team. Obviously, Cleveland was dominant in the regular season this past season, so I would expect them to have another very good regular season. That's why I said I think they'll end up with that one seed again, but we've seen that that doesn't necessarily matter. But I just think, as weak as that Eastern Conference is, I just think there's a number of teams that are a move or two away from really asserting themselves up to who knows, could be the 2 seed next year in the Eastern Conference. So I don't know. I just there's a bunch of different ways that this thing can go. Obviously, I think your San Antonio Spurs are going to improve. I do think my Grizzlies will probably take a step back, which it's sad to say, but and then I don't know what the Clippers are going to do because Derek Jones Jr. is a guy I've looked at on their team who I like a lot. They, I don't see them getting rid of him by any means, but like you said, I don't know if they can win. They're not going to win a championship. They're going to be a pretty good team. They finished the year regular season last year extremely good, but it took everything out of them to be able to do so, and then end up losing a very tough series in that round one to Denver in 7 games. Um, so there's a lot of things to keep an eye on. The Trailblazers, who feel decent about where they're at, and adding Holiday, trying to build around that defense, and now they have about 14 centers on their roster with Aiton, Klingon, and then the kid they drafted out of China in the first round this year. So I don't know. We're nowhere near the end of what this summer is going to be, and all to top that off, we have the summer league here in just about a week or two.
You just look at the arms race in the Western Conference. We know what the Thunder are. The Rockets just got Kevin Durant. The Lakers are going to have Luka Doncic for a full season. What are the Nuggets going to do? What are the Clippers going to do? The Wolves just got Naj Reid back. We'll see if they can replace Nickeil Alexander-Walker in some facet. The Warriors are going to have Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry for a full season. The Grizzlies, like you mentioned, might take a slight step back, but it's still going to be a very competitive ball team. Who knows what the Sacramento Kings are going to do? Likely moving on from DeRozan. They're going to have Levine still in the mix there. That's a team with a lot of question marks. I think the Mavericks have a chance to be good next year, assuming they go out and fulfill a point guard that can at least keep them afloat. Weirdly enough, I think the Suns are positioned to be just as competitive, if not more competitive than they were last year, if they can stay healthy and continue to build out a little bit of depth here. The Blazers, in my opinion, are going to be a better team than they were this past year. The Spurs are going to be a better team than they were this past year. The Jazz, I think, are going to be a better team than they were this past year, especially if they actually conform to tanking rules and don't just sit players because they feel like it. I think the Pelicans are going to be the worst team in the Western Conference by far, but that's 14 teams that I think are either improving or are going to be similar than what they were this past season. And so it's just going to be a gauntlet to go through this Western Conference again. It's going to be muddled from probably the second seed all the way down to 10, 11, 12, 13 again, like it was this year. You're going to see a team probably decide at the deadline, yeah, we don't have enough to fight with all of these heavyweights and drop down a little bit, like we saw several teams do this past year. But it's going to be just log jammed at the top once again. The East is wide open. The West is still really wide open. Everything outside of the Thunder. Who knows what the rest of these teams are going to look like? We still have a full offseason of maneuvering. I can't be stated how exciting the league is right now because it's the league of parity. You don't have the Chiefs dominating it every year. You don't have the Dodgers spending more money than every other team. You've got the league of parity. 7 different champions in 7 consecutive seasons. Could be 8 this year, depending on how the Thunder are able to reposition themselves after this past year. And so who really knows going into next year what things are going to look like, but I just can't overstate enough how exciting this offseason is going to be and how excited I am to watch next season, especially when you've got all these young up and coming teams that are going to be making big time pushes, there's going to be a team that's going to come out of nowhere and probably win 50 games that nobody expected, just like the Rockets did this year. I'm excited to see who that is. I just think we're in for an offseason full of fun that's going to set up for an exciting year. And we thought last year's trade deadline was crazy because of Fox and Luka Doncic getting moved. I think we could set ourselves up for a potential Giannis Bam type of sweepstakes at this deadline, which would just be crazy once again.
Yeah, I agree. There's no telling what's going to happen, what we're in store for, and like I said, these things are changing. By the time this episode gets released, we might see another guy opt out of his contract, or a guy get extended that we may not have expected, a guy being traded. And like I said, there will be a team who we don't think is going to be very good who ends up being good. Happens every year in the NBA, happens every year in the NFL as well. There's always a team who nobody really expects to do anything, and they go out there a la like nobody saw the Washington Commanders go out and make the NFC Championship this past season, but they do so. And not many thought the Indiana Pacers were going to go out and make it and win the Eastern Conference, but they go and do so. So we can sit here and predict all these kind of things, but at the end of the day, this is why we got to go play the games, and we're going to get games here in the summer league. And some teams are built for the summer league, like I mentioned. The Brooklyn Nets, this is their season coming up. The summer league is going to be their season. I do obviously all eyes are going to be on the Mavericks and the Spurs though in this summer league. That's what's going to bring any sort of attention towards it, and rightfully so. So I'm going to be watching those two teams for sure.
Before we kind of wrap this up, I got a little bit of breaking news that I think is going to rattle your brain a little bit here. The New York Knicks have reached out to South Carolina women's head coach Don Staley for their head coaching vacancy. At least a conversation there, maybe not an imminent hire, even I don't know the severity or the significance of it, but they have at least there has been at least a conversation.
That is absolutely I, I don't even know what from Tom Thibodeau to talking to I shouldn't even say what I want to say. Um, I, I would not be very thrilled if I were a New York Knicks fan right now when I would be considering my coaching search. I really thought that it was going to be a done deal with Mike and Norrie, but no. So I think a lot of these guys could be running from obviously not the team, but the the owner here. So I can't believe that I am now seeing this tweet, and I'm absolutely stunned.
Not saying that that's going to be the hire, but it would be an historic hire considering the circumstances and at just a weird hiring process to say the least. Clearly has not gone the way the New York Knicks had planned it to go. And I think that's just where I'm going to leave that conversation. But again, if you like basketball, watch the Summer League. These are guys outside of obviously the draft picks this year. Most of these guys are going to be fighting for roster spots. So these guys are going to be playing extremely hard. It's going to be fun basketball to watch. You're not going to know probably many of the names outside of your Harpers, your Flags, your Edgecombs, your Baileys, the guys that were taken in the first round, and even some guys that are taken second round that were just heralded college basketball players. But it'll be a fun style of basketball that I think you will enjoy if you just give it um, a chance. But we got, again, a lot to look forward to. We will start working on our top 10 all-time lists beginning next week, kind of get an idea that you can expect that later in July. That's not going to be something that maybe you'll see within the next couple of weeks, but maybe towards the end of the July, you'll start seeing that. Again, free agency wrap up podcasts will be coming over the next several weeks. And if there's any significant breaking news, we'll jump on here and talk about it. And then you can expect as August starts rolling around, end of July, you'll start getting some of our NFL previews, thoughts, teams that we can expect to be good. Maybe we're like a run at the NFL Super Bowl. And then the NBA season will wrap up shortly after that. We'll see preseason games into training camp right before the start of the season. So it'll all come very quickly, but free agency starts here in just a couple days, and that's what we've got our eye on right now. Other than that, I don't have many more thoughts. Josh, do you have anything to close out today's show?
Um, Overall, just want to say shout out to the Memphis Grizzlies going to get Cedric Coward, and all those things be on the lookout for. And yes, we are going to look into doing some NFL stuff this year. I'm pretty excited about that, especially as it's basically my last year run here, having Aaron Rodgers for one more season to keep up with. So I'm going to try and make the most of it and really lock into the NFL. At least I'm going to watch the NFL for the rest of my life, but this is going to be one year where I really am locked into what's going to be happening every single week. So look out for our insight on that as well later in the summer. And it was a fun draft, and I'm ready to be able to watch the Dallas Mavericks and the San Antonio Spurs in the summer league.
Well said. Again, you can find us anywhere you get your podcast. We're on social media at the State Line Fast Break Pod, Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. This has been yet another edition, episode 23. Be out on the lookout for our thoughts on free agency and the Summer League coming to you next week. Leave us any feedback, ratings, reviews. Give us suggestions about off-season topics now that we're kind of hitting a more quiet spot for the NBA, and we will make sure to address those moving forward. But once again, we thank you all for listening.